Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing this really easy milk bath tumbler with dried flowers. As always, I'll make sure to put everything that I used today down in the description box below so that way you guys can shop those items if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. I'm going to be using this skinny straight tumbler with the handle today. I went ahead and I prepped it and I primed it just this basic white color. I also have a nice fluffy brush. It's just a basic makeup brush that I got from the Dollar Tree. You just want a nice fluffy brush so that way you can apply your glue. Now the flowers that I'm using today, I just got off Amazon, but this is a great opportunity to use special flowers from a wedding or an anniversary or just a special occasion. If you happen to press your own flowers, this is definitely a great opportunity to use those. But I wanted to use something that anybody could use, so I'm using some off of Amazon today. And because we don't need too much to apply to the tumbler, I would say this kit could probably do 5, if not maybe 6 tumblers with all these flowers, and even maybe some coasters as well to kind of match. Now that I have my flowers all laid out here off to the side, I'm just going to figure out how I want the flow of my flowers, because I like to kind of do mine not quite in a swirl, but more in a flowy fashion to kind of resemble them floating around in a milk bath per se. So I'm just going to make sure that I try to come up underneath the handle. So I'm going to try to take it and swoop it up underneath the handle and then just kind of swoop it back around, and of course do a little bit on the bottom as well to kind of finish it off. Now, once I have that figured out, I'm just going to take a bit of my glue and I am going to just do sections at a time. I don't want to do the whole thing at once because I don't want a chance getting little hairs and stuff off my table onto it. So I'm going to go ahead and just do sections at a time. So I'm going to layer that glue down, and then I'm just going to start taking my flowers, and I don't want to fully fill it in. Again, we're just kind of getting our area ready, and then we'll kind of fill in from there. Now, as I get going, you may need to add a little bit more glue down for certain flowers. Some of the buds on the back of these flowers are a little bit thicker, so you might need to add a bit more dabs of glue down to make sure that it's going to adhere properly. But again, I'm just kind of swooping around, kind of going in that flow or motion that I would like to around all the way down to the bottom of this tumbler. Now that I have my flow figured out, this is what I have so far, just kind of getting things down so I know where to put the rest of it. Now we can go ahead and come back through and start adding more pieces. But this is where I'm going to be adding my bigger pieces in, so I'm going to be kind of filling in with that. I don't want to add too many big pieces because some of these big pieces do stick out a little bit. So because these are natural flowers, you're going to have a little bit of that going on. So I'm just trying to find the pieces that don't bulge out too much. Now, after I got my flowers laid down, I realized that some of these stems that are coming off of the flowers are just a little too stiff to be working with, and some of them laid completely flat and looked beautiful. But the ones that were a little too stiff, I would come through and kind of just break those off. Now, as a filler in between my flowers, I took one of the little roses that was in this kit, and I'm just gently pulling the petals off, and I'm going to fill in between all my flowers, giving it more of that dramatic flower look. Now, after I let that glue dry for a little bit, I'm going to come back through and I'm going to coat my flowers one more time with my glue. So I'm just going to take my glue and go over top of all the flowers, sealing everything down nice and tight against the tumbler. And you're going to notice I'm trying to be as gentle as possible, so some of these flowers are a little bit more delicate. So instead of kind of doing a sweeping up and down motion, I would come through and just kind of tap on top of it rather than doing the sweeping. So I would do a little bit of a tap, and then I would kind of even out the glue with a little bit of a sweeping motion to make sure everything is down as smooth as possible. Now, after I got my glue applied, I wanted to go ahead and come through and add a little bit of glitter on it. I mean, why not, you know? So I'm going to use a little bit of this full bloom, and I'm just going to take just a little. I don't want too much, you know, I don't want to take away from it too much. So I'm just going to take a little pinches at a time, and I'm just going to go directly down that flow of the flowers that we did. Now, once I get my glitter down the way that I would like it, I'm just going to come back through and gently tap all these chunky glitters down, making sure, again, that they're nice and flat against the tumbler as well. I even come through and kind of squish the flowers down a bit as well with my finger, just again to verify everything is as smooth as possible. So this is what we have so far. I'm going to set that off to the side and let that dry. Now, after my glue dried, of course, I went outside and I gave it a good coating of my 2x Ultra Clear just to really make sure everything's nice sealed down, especially those raw glitters that were on there. So now I have my epoxy and we're ready to make that milk bath look. Now I have a lot of epoxy mixed up here. You don't need this much. I went ahead and sectioned off a little bit of my clear epoxy into a separate cup. And into this main cup, I'm going to start adding a white mica powder. So just use your favorite white mica powder. And you don't want it fully saturated with your color, so you won't need to use as much mica powder as I did because I have a lot of epoxy in my cup. So just a little bit of your mica powder because you want it more translucent than anything, because we're going to come back through and kind of layer on and thicken up our colors as we go. But this is exactly what I want, just a little bit of translucentness to it, a great base for the start of this look. I'm going to go ahead and layer on this coating of epoxy here with our mica powders. And you want to remember that we're going to be building on more epoxy on over top of everything. So you don't really want to coat this up too thick because, like I said, we're going to be adding more epoxy on top of it. And we don't want this to kind of get wobbly at the top or the bottom or anything like that. So we're trying to keep these layers thin, but we can still build on top of it to get that look we would like. All right, it's on my turner and we're gonna go ahead and go back over to that same mixture that we used. I didn't use all of it on top of my tumbler. You wanna save a little bit for this process. I'm gonna add a little bit more mica powder. Again, I used too much epoxy, so I had to use more mica powder, but we really want it pigmented this time. So really make sure it's nice and pigmented this time. So I'm gonna mix that up really good. And then I'm just going to take fingerfuls of it and dab that around directly over top of the flowers, making sure that I go with the motion of the flowers, because you'll definitely be able to see a difference. The stuff that we laid on first, it's all gonna be kind of in a straight line, while the stuff that's around the flowers is going to look more swirly. And this is definitely gonna give it a lot more dimension. And once I am done adding that more concentrated mica mixture to the top of my flowers, I'm going to come back through with my clear epoxy and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take fingerfuls of it and I'm going to start to dabble that around on top of the flowers as well. And this is going to give it kind of that 3D illusion where some of it's going to look clear, some of it's going to look foggy, and it's going to make it look more like a milk bath, or, you know, like the stuff that floats around on top of the bath, you know, the soap and all that. It's going to give it more of that look. I didn't just do it to the flowers, I did it to all of the tumblers. So I kind of dabbled that in the white and on top of the flowers. Now into that clear mixture, since I'm done with that, I'm gonna go ahead and add some white alcohol ink. You just wanna make sure, again, that it's nice and opaque for you. You wanna make sure it's nice and concentrated with your coloring. So I'm gonna mix that up and I'm gonna start layering that on top over the flowers, all over the tumbler. So into the white portions, over the flowers and all that. And this is really gonna give us more depth, you know, white. It's like white on top of white on top of white. How do you make it look more textured and have more dimension? And this is pretty much what we're doing here, adding different textures with different pigments. All right, after I layered that on, you guys know I don't use a heat gun that often, but for this, I'm gonna use a heat gun because a heat gun is going to produce more heat and it's going to shift everything around a lot faster. So I don't wanna hit this up too much. I'm just going to get that epoxy flowing. It's gonna give it that longer, flowy look versus my blow dryer, which will only just kind of slightly move everything. I wanted this to be more streaked through, again, giving us that soapy milk bath illusion. So I hit it up just very quickly, just until everything started moving, as you can see here, and that was it. And once I did that, I went ahead and took it off my turner and I'm gonna tip it up and then I'm gonna tip it back down to kind of make those lines not as straight across. I wanted it more swirly and twirly on the tumbler rather than just, again, straight across. So just some quick motions up and down to get everything kind of sliding around, stick it back on my turner, and there we go. Now one more time before I just let it be and do its thing on my turner, I'm gonna add a little bit more of my alcohol inks into my white epoxy mixture that we made up. And I'm gonna come through one more time and just do up a bit more of just these streaks running through the flowers. Again, just adding more dimension, more texture with this look. It's really soft, it's really elegant. Don't be afraid to get up in there and just really kind of outline your flowers and just play around with it and have fun. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and let that cure, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, we are back and she is ready to have another coating of epoxy put over top and another layer of our soap look, yes. Now there are gonna be some flowers that you're gonna need to sand, but we're not gonna do that just yet. We wanna wait until after this coating of epoxy that we're gonna be doing right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and layer up my tumbler. I believe I put about 20 milliliters of epoxy on top of this, and I wanna save just a little bit into my cup for what we wanna do next. All right, it's back on my turner. I have a little bit of my epoxy and I'm gonna add a couple drops again of my white alcohol ink, and we're gonna add one more finishing touch layer to the top of this tumbler. So again, after I get that mixed up, I'm just gonna take my stick and again, just run right across the top, over top of my flowers, giving it just so much more dimension and just so much more of this beautiful flowy bath look. So after I get this applied, earlier I used my heat gun to really get that epoxy moving and rolling and give us that look that we wanted with it streaking across the tumbler. Now this time I'm gonna go ahead and come through with just my blow dryer, and then we're just gonna move around this epoxy just a little bit, just to kind of give it just a little bit of a swirl because I don't want it to shift around too much. But I have a lot of people ask me why I use a hair dryer versus a heat gun, and this is why. So when I only want a little bit of movement, this is perfect for me. It's not too much heat. It's more of a blowing force rather than heat. So everything's gonna kind of stay where I want it to. And then I come through and I hit it up really good with my torch to make sure I get any of those micro bubbles. The heat gun will get your bubbles, but again, everything shifts around too much. So this for me is perfect for just this portion, just to get a little bit of that movement without it completely rolling around the entire tumbler. All right, now all that's left to do is go ahead and let that cure. After it's cured, I'm gonna come through and I'm gonna trim up the rim really well. I'm gonna make sure that I come through and give it a good sanding as well. And this is the point that I'm gonna come through and knock down any kind of pieces of these flowers that are sticking out beyond the epoxy. You definitely want that as smooth as possible, but these are natural flowers, so there are going to be some like raised areas, but you definitely don't want any kind of like pokey sticks coming out. You know what I mean? So it will have a raised look effect to it because again, it's natural flowers and some of the buds are just a bit bigger than other buds, but that doesn't bother me. So, you know, it kind of gives it more of a unique look to it, I think. Now that's all cleaned off and everything and sanded and ready to go, I'm gonna go ahead and apply just a very simple decal. This is just an infinity heart. I liked it, I thought it went well. It kind of could go with a wedding, or it could go with Valentine's Day, it could go with anniversaries, like I said, anything like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna place it on the very back of my tumbler, around the back here. I just kind of I did about 2.5 by 2, so like two by 2 of it. I didn't want it too big, and I just kind of placed it at the very bottom of my tumbler around the back side. The vinyl that I use is like this silver glittery look, but a white would have looked really well with it too, like monochromatic, you know, white on white would have looked really, really cute with it too. It would almost been like a secret message on the tumbler, but you know. And all that is left to do is add your last finishing coats of epoxy, and she is good to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.